Okay, hey everyone, my name is Martin Braun. I'm an Android developer advocate for Stream. And today we're going to look at how to use Git within Android Studio. So two caveats here. While I'm going to be giving this talk in Android Studio and I'm using an Android project for this, the open source project that we have for Stream Chat on Android. The actual advice applies to anything that's IntelliJ based. Whether you're using Rider, as it turns out people are using around here, or PyCharm or WebStorm or any of those IDEs, or just IntelliJ IDEA itself, it's going to be the exact same Git features that you can use as what we have in Android Studio. Also, on another note, I am not like a pro Git user. I don't know how to do fancy things with Git on the command line. So there's going to be people here who know that better. What I want to show you is how I do my day-to-day work with Android Studio and how Android Studio makes that really easy for me because I very, very rarely have to drop down to the command line. And when I do, I usually copy paste things from Stack Overflow. Okay, let's start with basics. So first of all, if you're in a project which is inside a Git repository, the Git tab is automatically going to appear for you. So you can find that on the bottom here by default. You can either click that or use Alt-9 to open it. And within there, you have three sections, basically. So on the left-hand side, you have a branch browser, which, by the way, you can collapse if you never use it, where you can look at all of your local branches and also all of your remote branches. If you use some kind of prefixing, so if you use a feature prefix or something like these POC prefixes here in the names of the branches, you can actually group by those within this view. There's this icon on the left here, which is group by directory. And if you click that, then all of those prefixes that are in the branches names will turn into folders so that your branches are a bit easier to manage like that. Then in the middle, obviously, we have the list of commits. So this shows all commits from all branches interweaved within this view. And in here, we see if a commit is the tip of a branch. For example, we can see all of these branch labels in the commits in the middle. You can customize a bunch of view options here, and I'm not going to go through all of them. I want to highlight just one, which is that if you go into the view settings, again, a lot of options here, you can choose which columns are shown. And by default, I believe the hashes are not shown in this view. So if you want to have an easier reference of Git hashes, you can toggle that on and off right there. Then as you're going through your logs, as you're selecting individual commits, you'll see them show up in the right-hand side, which is the detail view here. So here I can see all of the files that were affected in the given commit. If I double click one of them or I select them and I hit Ctrl D on it, then I get a diff view, which is this built-in view that's used for all diffing in Android Studio and IntelliJ. And then down here on the bottom, you can see a bunch of commit details. So the message, time, who the author was, if there was a description, it would show up here. And a cool feature is that you can check whether a commit has been merged into a given branch yet. So let's say that I find something that's already been merged. Then I can see that this commit is part of all of these branches. So for example, I can quickly check that develop already has this commit in it. All right, we can filter this view by a bunch of things. You can, if you wanted to get just the commits on one branch, you could do that. You can use this branch selector, select something, and now you get this flat view of only the commits that are in that single branch. You can do similar filtering for users. You can use auto-completion here, or you can just select me, which is the locally configured Git user. There's also a date filter, which has some quick filters, and also a detailed selector. I want to show this just because it's really exciting, because like this UI is probably one of the most ancient parts of Android Studio. If you look at it, there are like button icons here that are like not rendered correctly, but it does work otherwise. So you can like input two dates and you can filter for commits that happen between those, obviously. Something more exciting in terms of filtering is the path filter. So here, if you choose select in tree, that gives you the most convenient UI. And you can use this to view commits that affected some subset of the files in your project. So let's say that I want to look at only commits that relate to our new Jetpack Compose module, then I could select just that directory, I could hit OK, and now my view is filtered to, well, the commits that I've just described. So if I open any of these, I'll now see that something in the Compose module has been affected by each of these commits. So if I don't care about anything else going on, because it's a very large project, maybe it's a monorepo and there are Android and iOS commits and so on, you can use this to filter for just the things that are relevant for you. You can also do this starting from the project view, by the way. So let's say that I want all of the commits that have changed anything in the DocuSars directory, which is where our Markdown documentation lives. I could right-click that and I could use Git and then Show History, which will open a new tab within the Git window. So I still have my original logs here, which I was using, but I now have a new window where I see the history of just this one folder. So again, I can go to the commits here, and on the right-hand side, I will see the changes that were made within that folder, within that commit. And if I want to check out the full commit, I can always right-click this and, for example, copy the revision number, which I could then go back to the log and search for. So now I would get the full commit, and if I cancel the search, I would see it in context with all of the commits that surrounded it. You can also get the history for a single file in a similar way. So for example, if we go to our changelog, which is what it sounds like, it's basically our release notes that we maintain in a Markdown file. And I use the show history action in Android Studio that I can either search for with action search, which is Ctrl-Shift-A or Shift-Command-A, depending on your platform. Or this is one of the really frequent Git commands, so it's actually also up here on the top in the toolbar. So I could also tap that, and I would again get a new little tab here within the Git window, and now I would see just the commits that have modified this file. And as I'm going through here, I don't see the full commit details, I see just the changes for the current file. So if I want to investigate one of these things further, I can again do something like right-click and either copy the revision, or I can just choose show in Git log, which is going to take me back there. And now the commit is selected, and I can check out all of the other things that were changed within the same commit. Obviously you can search for anything else. This isn't really worth showing, but if I want all commit messages that have some word in them, then I can do that with the search field. Something really important is that you can easily browse the contents of your repository at some earlier revision or on some other branch than what you have right now. So right now I'm on this feature branch up here on the top, but let's say that I want to check out what the contents of a file were on the develop branch. I can right click here, I can choose the develop branch, and I have an option to I don't have to select the branch. So what I wanted to do was show repository at revision, which is tied to the revision, so you just have to select the commit for it. If you do that, you get a new window up here, which is very similar to the project view, but as you can see up here on the top, it shows the project at that revision, so at some past point in time. And you can pretty much browse for anything here. So you can open files, and if you open the files, you'll also see that it has the revision hash on the tab's name up there, because we're looking at the file not as it is in the current file system, but how it used to be at some other revision. Obviously this file is read-only because it doesn't make sense to edit it, but you get all of the Android Studio and IntelliJ features here when you're browsing the file, which is useful. So you can browse these files with syntax highlighting and in the environment that you're used to. And if you need to grab some piece of code, you can easily do that from here, which is probably easier in a lot of cases than opening a browser, going to GitHub, finding the revision, browsing files within GitHub. So this is a simpler way to do that. On a similar note, you can also compare what you have right now on your current branch to any other point in history by, again, just right-clicking and using compare with local. So since I'm in a feature branch and I'm comparing with develop, I basically am looking at the changes that would be there if I open the PR from my current branch to the develop branch right now. And I see all the files, all the changes, and again, just selecting any of these will give me the detailed diff view so that I can view those specific changes. All right, so that's it for viewing logs and an introduction. Next, let's take a look at some basic Git commands. So I mostly use action search for this. I could bind all of these things to shortcut, but I keep using action search for it for some reason, which is again Control-Shift-A or Shift-Command-A. And anything that's related to Git is available from here if you wanted to. So for example, you can type in branches and it gives you a branch switcher. Of course, this also has a shortcut, or you can do a fetch or a pull or any other Git related action. Let's take a look at the branch switcher, which you can either open from here with this action, or it's also down here on the bottom where you see the current branch. If you click that, it also opens the same branch switcher if you prefer using the mouse. So in here, again, we have local branches and remote branches. If I click any of them, I get a bunch of actions, like I can check out that different branch. I can also favorite branches, which is useful. So for example, if I want to reference a branch like the develop branch on origin a lot, then I can come here and start that branch. And the next time that I open this dialog, that branch is going to be the top one that shows up under remote branches. And it makes it easier to find, especially if you have a lot of things going on at the same time. Okay, that's good enough for branches for now. So something else you can do is, let's actually switch branches while we were there. You can, of course, search your branches so that you don't have to scroll through them. I almost forgot to mention this. You don't have to click the search box at the top. If you're just in a list, you can just start typing and it will start filtering, and then you can easily check out some other branch, for example. Within your bench, you can do things like fetch, which would update all of the information we have about the remote repository, so that in our Git log, we would see where all of the branches are. This is useful to do like fairly frequently so that you have some idea of what's going on in the repository, what others are merging, and so on. If I want to update just the current branch, I can do a git pull, of course, where I can by default pull from the same branch if I'm tracking a branch on origin, but I can also just select any other branch and pull the changes from that branch into my current one if that's what I need. In this dialog, by the way, you get a bunch of options, which you might be used to from the command line already. So if you want to make sure that, for example, no merge commit occurs when you pull the changes, you can use the ff-only flag and things like that. And all of this is exposed here on the GUI. It has some basic explanations. And it also makes sure that you're not selecting options that don't make sense together. So you can't do ff-only and no ff at the same time and things like that. Then if I actually just want to update from the current remote branch. So if I'm sitting on develop and I want to grab the changes from origin develop, an easy way to do that is to just use update project, which has Ctrl-T as a shortcut. And it's also this blue arrow up here on the toolbar, because again, it's a very frequently used Git operation. Here I get to choose whether I want to merge or rebase my current local branch. And yeah, that's basically it. It's going to grab changes from the remote, and I'm going to get those in the local develop branch that I have as a copy. One more thing that I tend to use from actions is annotate, which I can usually spell. And the problem I'm having is that I'm not in a valid file within the repo. So let's say that I'm in some file within our Git repository. So if I type in annotate, the first action is going to be git annotate with git blame, which is a simple toggle. So I can just hit enter to toggle this on and off. And what it shows is these git blame information next to the line numbers in the gutter. So I can take a look at who modified each line the last time, when that happened. And if I want to know the details of one of these, let's say that I want to find where this version number came from, I can just click in there, and it gives me the full commit that modified that file. So here, for example, I would see that this was a new file within this commit, and we actually removed the file with the same name previously. And I could keep diving into the history here if I wanted to. So I could just hit Ctrl-D on there to see the diff. And, you know, I would, again, be able to look at the version number that was there. And I could keep doing git blame by either the mouse or shortcuts. And then I would see when that happened, and so on and so on. So this can be a useful way to quickly start diving into your Git history. And importantly, to even track down changes if they were across files. Because if code moves from file to file over time, then looking at the history for just the current file, which again, you can do like this, might not always give you the full context because the changes might have happened in a different file previously. But if you just keep diving like this, you'll probably be able to track down the changes. Okay, next up, I'm gonna go back to my feature branch, and what I want to look at next is a plugin for Android Studio, which is called Git Toolbox. So this is a plugin that enhances the Git experience in Studio a lot. It does a lot of things. I want to show you just a few features now. It's important that it's all one word because otherwise you're not gonna find it in the plugins marketplace. Once you manage to install it though, it will show up under version control in your settings. And as I said, it does a lot of things. You can see that there's like really deep settings in here. What I want to highlight is two things. So first of all, it gives you a lot of different decoration options for your IDE, which is all of these checkboxes on the first page. I have the decoration for the status bar enabled, which is these 3 checkboxes on the top, which give me, first of all, this part of this toolbar, which would tell me if I'm ahead or behind by any commits compared to the remote, if I was tracking a remote branch. And it also gives me git blame information down here on the bottom. So if I go through the different lines of this file, you can see that on the very bottom right corner, the git blame information keeps updating. And if I click any of those, I get some more info. And then I can copy the revision, look at all the files in the commit, or just go to the git log and see what the changes were with, again, like the full git context. Other decorations you can enable are things like the editor inline blame, which some people really enjoy using. I don't like it personally, but I want to show you because I know that some people like doing this. So editor inline blame looks something like this. It will give you the same git blame information, but it will always give you that information on whatever line you're on while you're editing the code as you're going through like this. So again, you can decide whether or not you want something like this, but it's a feature that's available in the plugin. Something that you probably should use is autofetch. So the plugin can actually just run a git fetch for you, either on branch switches or just periodically set to something like 15 minutes by default. This makes sure that when you're looking at the git logs, you don't have outdated information there, which is like you don't end up doing something like rebasing to an old version of the developed branch if there are already newer changes there and things like that. So this is nice to always just keep your git log up to date and have it show the actual current state of the remote repository. All right. Next up, I'm going to start making actual changes in the project, and then we're going to look at how we can commit those and how we can manage those changes in various ways. So I'm in this dependencies file, which lists all the version numbers that we have in the project. So I'm just going to bump a bunch of versions here to get started with. So I'm going to do something like bump compose to 1.0.5. I also know that I can bump this compose view model dependency. Then I'm going to update the Kotlin version to a newer version to match that. And I'm going to update Docker, which will also match the Kotlin version. Since I updated this Kotlin version, I actually know already that I'm going to break some code with this. So I'm going to jump to a random part of the code, and I'm going to add a annotation use site target because the newer Kotlin versions require for me to do that. Okay, I think that's a good start for some changes. You can already see that as I'm making these changes, the IDE helps me keep track of what I've changed in Git. There are these blue markers on the left-hand side here, again, next to the line numbers in the gutter, which mean that I've changed the lines that are marked. And if I click this, I can view what was there previously. I could also immediately revert from here, or I could copy the old version of the code if I needed it for some reason. If I create something new, that's going to be marked with a green highlight on the left. And if I remove something, then that's going to be marked with this triangle that shows that there are some missing lines there in the Git history. And again, for all of these changes, just clicking it reveals what the previous state was. So if I remove something, I can click it and quickly check what's missing from there. I can also revert any of these changes either by going through the clicking routine that I just showed you, or just using Ctrl-Alt-Z, which just rolls back whatever change your cursor is currently on. Okay, let's do some more cleanup. So next, I'm gonna take a look at these configuration options that we have in our build Gradle files. These are actually not needed anymore in new Compose versions, so I'm just gonna come here and remove that. So I'm gonna remove it in one file, and I'm gonna remove it in another. And finally, we have some classes which we have already deprecated but have not removed yet in the project, but they don't have any usages. So I'm going to come in here and just delete these two deprecated classes real quick. So I made a bunch of changes now. And if I go back to our Git log and switch to the local changes tab, we can see all of those changes captured here. And I can, of course, page through them and take a look at what's different. You can group these changes in a bunch of different ways within this panel, which is useful in some cases. Right now, we only have 6 file changes, so we can probably still keep track of them. But if you've changed 100 files for some reason, then this will not give you a very good overview anymore. So there's this icon here, which is Group By, where you can choose to group by directory, by module, or both. So if I do a module grouping, you'll see that I'm going to see the top level Gradle modules now, and all the files within that module that were changed are going to be listed in a flat structure. And if I also group by directory, then I'm also going to see each individual directory within those modules. And if I only group by directory, then I don't have the top level thing. I only see the directories like this. For now, I'm going to disable those, but this is a really cool feature. And you actually get the same thing in your Git log. So right here on the detail view, you also have the exact same icon, and you can choose whether you want to group things or not. And you also get these in the commit dialog, which is what we're going to look at next. So if you have some changes pending and you want to commit those changes, I'm going to do a Gradle sync so that Android Studio is happy in the meantime. So if you want to commit those changes, you can use Ctrl-K, which obviously stands for commit, to commit them, or Command-K on a Mac. And this gives you this commit dialog, which again includes the same grouping and the same view on the top here. So again, same icon, you can choose how you want to view these files. Within this dialog, you can choose to commit just a portion of your local changes. So if I don't want these changes, for example, or ooh, things are jumping around as I'm doing a Gradle sync. That's really exciting. Okay, let's wait for that to complete maybe. Okay, excellent. So you can unselect some of these changes if you want to commit just a part of the changes you've made. And you can also do this within each file. So for example, in the dependencies file, we've made a bunch of different changes. And if you select that file, then on the pane down here on the bottom, you can unselect just a portion of the changes within the file if you don't want that to be a part of your current commit. Okay, you do have a lot of options here for what you want to do with a commit. So before a commit, assuming that Android Studio is actually indexed, you can choose to validate the commit message if you have rules set up for that. You can run code analysis and check to-dos so that Android Studio can warn you if you've introduced any new errors or warnings that it can detect already, or if you've added to-dos that you haven't completed yet. You can also use more really useful things like optimizing imports and reformatting code before the commit so that you can make sure that that doesn't have to be done in a separate commit later on. Once you have committed something, let's just do, we've done a lot of random things, so we're going to just say improve project. And once you have committed something, you could, of course, push those changes. Both of these actions, by the way, are on the toolbar as well. Commit and push are both up here. One of them is Ctrl-K, the other is Ctrl-Shift-K, or the same thing with Shift and Shift command, or sorry, Command and Shift command on a Mac. And this opens the push dialog where if you don't have an existing branch yet, it's going to tell you that you're creating a new one on origin. You could push these changes, and you could also force push, which can be useful if you've edited history and you need to overwrite something on the remote branch. You can also push tags if that's what you're missing. So if you've created a new tag and you want to get that to the remote repository, you can also use the same push dialog and use this option down here. All right, so if I look at our Git history now, I will see the commit that I've just created, which has these like unrelated changes inside it. So let's fix this. Let's say that I want to undo this commit and I want to have smaller, nicer commits that contain like logically grouped changes somehow. To do that, I can right-click the previous commit on my branch and I can do a reset of the current branch to that previous revision in Git. Here I have a bunch of options. Most importantly, there is a soft and a hard reset option. If I were to do a hard reset, all of my files in the file system would be reverted to whatever they look like in Git at that earlier revision, so I would lose all of my changes. But if I do a soft reset, all that happens is my last commit is going to get removed, and everything else will remain in the file system as a pending change. So that's what I actually want to happen here. So I'm going to do a soft reset, and if I go to local changes, I'm now back into the state where I haven't committed these changes yet. So now I get the opportunity to actually sort these out in some way and put them into more sensible commit messages. A really good way to do that within Android Studio is to use change lists. You're actually using change lists whether you want to or not, because everything always happens on a change list in Android Studio. By default, as you can see, we have this default change list that contains all of the modifications we've made to the code. And if I right click here, I can always just create a new change list. So for example, if I want a separate change list for updating the Kotlin version, let's say, then I can create a change list which will show up here. And now I can move some changes to that. So for example, I can take the message.kt file, which was related to the Kotlin version bump, and I can move that over here. Or I can go to the dependencies.kt file where we bumped a bunch of different things. But for example, I want this specific line change to be on that other change list. So I can just use a right click here and use move to another change list, which is also Alt-Shift-M. And here I can pick between all of the other change lists. And if I hit OK, then only that partial change within the file is going to get moved to the new change list. So we now have dependencies.kt listed in two places because some of its changes are on one change list and this single line change here is on another. You can also move things between change lists from the editor on the top. So if I want to put this change of the Docker version bump onto the new change list as well, I could come in here and just pick what change list it's a part of. And as I switch that, you're going to see that the highlights next to the line numbers will change. So for things that are on my currently active change list, I'm going to get a full color indicator there. And for everything else, I get this outline style, which indicates that if I were to commit my current change list, this change, which is right here, would not be included in it. Okay, let's do some more change lists. So I'm going to grab these two files, which is just removing deprecated things. I can use move to another change list. And since it doesn't have a change list yet, I can just create it by typing in the name here. So this would be remove deprecated use cases. And that creates the change list and moves the files over as well. And then I also want, let's say, these two things on a separate change list. So this would be remove unused, I don't know, compose option. Probably could be nicer. And finally, I have this change where I'm bumping the actual compose version. So I'm going to make this update compose to 105. And again, I'm seeing this new batch here, which keeps indicating to me that I'm going to be creating a new change list with this operation. So now all of my changes are sorted neatly into change lists. And if I keep making changes in the editor, that's going to go to whatever the currently active change list is. And I can change that really easily at any time. So if I want to add some changes, for example, to the compose change list, I can either right click and set it to active, or I can just use Control Space, which will bump it on the top and bold it out so that I know that that's the active one. So if I want to do something compose related, for example, I can also bump the accompanist version there. Then because that's the currently active change list, you'll see that it gets added to that one. Okay, why is it so useful that we created all of these change lists? What's the point? Well, now if we want to commit these things separately, we can do that. In fact, if we open the commit dialog with Ctrl-K, that always opens with the currently selected active change list on it. So you can actually pick between these on the top here. You can choose which change list you want to commit, but by default, it's gonna open with the active change list in it. So here we would only commit the changes related to the compose version bump. And what's more is that the name of the change list is going to be pre-filled as the commit message. So if you've created nice change lists and they have descriptive names, which are in the format of whatever you want to be your commit messages, then going from having things on your change lists to having them committed is really quick, because you can just tap through all of your change lists, commit them as is. You're going to use the message from the name of the change list, and that's it. So you can really breeze through these if you've already created your change lists. So let me commit this. And then I'm going to switch the active change list to be the default one now. And Studio at this point will recognize that I have an active change. I have a change list that's empty and no longer active. So I can just clear that up real quick. And if I want to commit something else, one of the other change lists, I can also select that, hit Ctrl-K on it, which will of course select it for the commit dialog. And from here, from like just one step, I can commit that as well, remove the change list, and now I'm done with it. So now I have these two commits here with nice descriptive messages on them. Okay, change lists are useful to like work on independent things at the same time, and then you can commit them in nicely formatted messages, but you can also do more with them, which is where it really gets exciting. So you can grab one of these change lists, for example, and copy all of the changes that are part of the change list, which is hard to talk about, and place it on your clipboard. So you can right click and either copy as patch to clipboard, which will immediately just copy it, or you can create a patch from local changes, which gives you a longer dialog where you can pick and choose whether you actually want to include everything, and then you create a patch, and then you can choose where you want to save this file and so on. But for now, I'm just gonna put this on my clipboard. And once I have it on my clipboard, let's say that I didn't have these changes locally, so I'm just going to roll these back and I'm going to remove the change list. So once I have this on my clipboard, which you can imagine you could share like over chat with some of your colleagues, or you could include it in a PR description, whatever you've copied. Let's actually take a look at what that is. I'm going to open a new Scratch file and paste it. So what ends up on your clipboard is this contents. So it's just in a standard Git patch format, and it shows you what the changes are that were on the change list that you've copied. And as I said, you can share this with other people. And if they copy this, they can just use apply patch, which is an action in Android Studio. You can either do it from a file again, or you can do it from just the clipboard. And if I do that, I get this dialog where I can actually create a new change list. So this would be update Kotlin again, and that restores all of the changes that I had. I'm trying to rename this change list, which is not happening for some reason. Oh, I was hitting the wrong shortcut. Okay, so that will put those changes into a change list just like that. So this is really an easy way to share even large lists of changes with others, and because you don't have to like describe over chat like, oh, change this value and that value in those like 2 or 3 files, and that's how you try something. You can simply create a patch file and share that around if you want to. Another thing you can do with these change lists is you can put them away for later if you want to get back to that work, but you don't want to commit it now and you don't want to lose it. So the way that you can do that is you can right click a change list and you can use shelve changes. Shelving is a feature in Android Studio, which is kind of similar to stashing things with Git, but this is managed entirely by Studio, so it's not a Git feature. Here again, you get this thing that looks like a commit dialog, but it's actually a shelf dialog. And if I shelve a change list, you're going to see that the change list itself is removed, but I now have a new tab, which is the shelf, where a bunch of files can live. So instead of having it in my local file system, I now have these changes on the shelf. So for example, if I look at whatever was in here, like the Docker version bump, I can see that now I have the old version in my actual file system up here in the editor. So these changes are removed from the file system and they're on the shelf. Things that go on the shelf actually end up inside the idea folder. So if you open idea and you reload from disk so that everything's up to date, you can see that within the shelf folder, you're going to see all of your different shelves. And each of those are actually just patch files, which are in the exact same format that we were copying earlier. So theoretically, you could do something like make some local changes, which you need for testing a new feature. You could put those on a separate change list. You can shelve that change list. Because it's in the idea folder, you could commit it to Git. And these sets of changes could be added to your repository, and then anyone who comes by and clones the repository could unshelve these changes locally, because whenever they pull the repo, they would now see that these things are on the shelf right here. So this again would be a way to share just lists of changes with others that can be really, really easily applied to a project, like without creating a new branch and pushing it there as a commit or doing something like that. You can also move things between local changes and the shelf really, really quickly. You can do this with drag and dropping with the mouse. So if I grab this shelf, I can drop it back into local changes, which will now actually make the changes in my project. And if I grab something that's a local change, I can drop it onto the shelf, and now it's there. So this again is really, really easy to go back and forth between, and I can just decide whether I want something to be an active change or if I want it to be shelved. In contrast to this, I'm not going to actually stash something into Git, but if I were to use the stashing feature, that would get rid of all of my change lists, because it would stash all of my pending things. So it would just look at the files to stash, and it would stash all of them. And then if I restore it, I would have to rebuild my change lists, which might have been complex because I have a lot of changes that I'm managing. One pro for stashing is that it's a standard Git feature. So if you're using some external Git client or the command line, then those stashed files would also show up there. Anything that's related to shelving is just within IntelliJ, so it's only going to be read by IntelliJ and no other tools will support it. But in general, there's probably very, very, very few places where you should use stashing instead of shelving. Okay, I think that's everything around shelving. Let me commit these last two change lists, which should be really quick and easy as I promised. So I'm going to commit this and I'm going to commit that. And now I have just all four of these commits that I created here during this talk. By the way, if you think you never need these change lists and these local changes, something you might want to consider is that this is really useful if you want to make local changes for like testing purposes, but you want to make sure that you never accidentally commit those. For example, I can go to our chat initializer class in our library, and I could do something like remove the offline enabled line from here. So let's say that I want to do some, okay, I just haven't built the project. I'm going to ignore that. So let's say that I want to do some local testing where I don't want offline support to be enabled because, I don't want things to be cached. I could remove just that one line locally, and I could do something quickly like grab this, move it to a change list called temp. And this way, if I keep making proper changes that, I actually want to commit for some reason, then all of those would be on my default change list. Whenever I opened the commit dialog, I would just keep using the default change list. And this change would keep living in the file system locally, but I would never accidentally commit it because I would never select the temp change list. This is something I do quite a lot, so maybe you'll find that useful as well. Okay, let me clear all of that up. All right, so here's what we have so far. We've made 4 new commits with a bunch of changes in them, and they have okay commit messages at this point. So now what I want to look at is how you can modify your existing Git history using Android Studio's Git features. The simplest possible edit is probably to edit the very last commit that you've had. So I looked at this changelog file before where we usually note if we've bumped a dependency, for example. So here we have this Kotlin version bump that we've made, but we haven't notified our clients. So for this, we would probably want to do something like updated Kotlin to whatever version it is. And we would want to commit this. And I could, of course, add this to a new commit and, that would be okay. But I can also just, while committing, select the amend commit option up here on the top, which will pre-fill the commit message Usually. This depends on how you do it exactly, but it will usually pre-fill the commit message with whatever your last commit message was. And if you ever lose that, there's always Control M, which gives you the list of recent commit messages, which is also this button on the right-hand side here. So if you ever lose a commit message, you can just grab it from there. And if I choose to amend the commit, and I actually do that, then instead of creating a new commit, the changes that I was committing will now be added to the change set of the previous one. So now I'm bumping the dependency and writing into the changelog about it within the same commit. So that's fairly straightforward. That's an easy edit of the Git history. What else might we want to do? So for example, let's say that I have this commit here and I don't think the commit message is descriptive enough. This is really easy to edit. You just have right-click actions for this. So you could do, where is it? It's edit commit message. The reason why I had to find it is because I usually use the shortcut. So as you can see, you can use F2 to do that. So if I want to say I did this in the offline module, for example, then I could run that. And now you would see that the commit message was changed, and we could do that in place without like any real trouble. And we didn't have to like go in and recommit all the changes that we've made along the way. What if I want to add some more changes to something that's here in the middle of history? So for example, we had another version bump there. What if I also want to update the changelog for this? Well, now we go to the more serious tools, and we're going to right click and choose interactively rebase from here. So whenever you do an interactive rebase, what ends up happening is that you're basically gonna replay all of the commits from whatever revision you've selected all the way up to the current time. So as I did the rebase on that fourth commit, I see all 4 of these commits now. And within this rebase dialog, I get to edit them pretty much arbitrarily. So for example, I could do something like change the order of these commits. As you can see, I can just drag and drop these. And if I hit start rebasing, then the order of those commits will just change in history. So now you can see that one of the older commits is actually after a newer commit in history because I swapped them around. Or something else I can do within this dialog is I could select a commit like this one that I wanted to modify, and I could use this pause icon here to stop to edit while I'm replaying the commits. So if I now do start rebasing, you'll see that Studio tells me that I've now stopped to edit during the rebase, and you'll also see this yellow tag here, which is the current head within Git. So now I could come in here and say updated compose to 1.0.5, and I can commit this. So, you know, update changelog with compose version bump or something like that. And if I create that commit will now come after the original commit where we stopped to edit. And if I continue rebasing, all of the other commits that were left over that I was originally replaying will now be applied after the new one that I made. So now I can actually get things like merge conflicts. So because I have 2 commits that edited the file in the same place, I would have to resolve that merge conflict, which of course is really convenient to do with Studio's tools as well. And if I continue rebasing, you'll now see that I've inserted this brand new commit into the middle of my history. And so now I'm bumping the version here, and I'm updating the changelog about it in the next commit. Okay, what if we actually wanted these to happen within the same commit? I could have just done it right the first time around, but I intentionally didn't because I wanted to show you another feature, which is that during rebasing, you can just select multiple commits, for example, these 2 that we were talking about, and you can either squash or fix up them. In this case, we would want to use fix up. So what fix up does is it will merge all of the commits you've selected into a single commit. And the message for the new commit will simply be the top commit here. So everything that's under it will just get pushed into the top level commit as additional changes. And only the commit message of the top commit will be kept. So if I hit this rebase, you'll now see one of these commits disappear. So now I'm up to just 4 new commits again. But now the update compose commit contains both of these changes from the previous 2 commits. I could have also done this right the first time around, as I mentioned. So let's do just one more of these. So we have another version bump here, which is for the room library. And I can do interactive rebase, and I can stop to edit. And if I run that, I will now be again in some past time in Git history just after creating this updated room version commit. And if I want to take note of this, I'm going to say updated room to whatever version it is. Then instead of creating a new commit in the middle of history here, I can just amend the previous commit. Again, the commit message should be pre-filled for you. And if you hit commit on this and then continue rebasing, then we now have the same history as before, but we actually went back in time really quick and edited this commit and put some new changes on there. Some more things you can do around here. So I have a bunch of changes here that are all related to room, like these three commits. And if I want all of these to be just a single commit instead of having separate ones, I could do another interactive rebase, and we already know that we can fix up using this dialog, but we can also do a squash, which will again, just create a new commit, just a single one from all of the ones that you previously had selected, but with the difference that now the first commit is going to end up being the commit message and everything else is thrown into the description of the commit by default. But you also get to edit this, so if I don't want that to be the commit message for my new commit, I could just grab one of the other lines, I could reorder them, and this way this would be the commit message, and the rest of the previous messages would end up being the description. And again, if I just do a rebase, I'm now going to see that I have just this single commit, but now it has a lot of changes because it includes the changes from all of the old ones. Squashing, by the way, is also available here as an action, so you don't have to go into interactive rebasing. You also have squash commits right here. You also have something that's both here in this menu and within the interactive rebase dialog, which is just a drop commit, which you can use if you want to just remove a commit from a branch entirely. So if I do that, that commit is just simply dropped, and now it's just not part of the history for this branch anymore. Okay, from here I wanted to show you just one last thing. Let's say that I have this feature branch and I've now cleaned up my commits in a bunch of ways. They have the contents that I want to be in there. But if I select all of these and look at the diff here on the right hand side, I see that I've made a lot of changes and there's still a lot of unrelated things, and I don't want all of that to be on the same PR. So let's say, for example, that I want to just get this removal of 2 use cases into develop really quickly. So I want this to be on a new branch on its own, and I want to open a PR for that. So a really quick way to do that is to go to the develop branch, either through the branch picker or finding it anywhere else in the UI really. And I can do new branch from selected. So I could create a feature branch like remove use cases, which is now down here, which matches the tip of the develop branch. And to grab just one commit from this random feature branch here, I could right click and just cherry pick it. So this is going to grab that commit and add it to your current branch. So now I would be able to push this new branch onto develop, and it will only have this one commit, and I could get it merged quickly. Or for example, if I wanted all of the version bumps to be merged, I could create a new branch, update versions. I could select a bunch of these version update commits, and I could cherry pick either by right click and cherry picking, or it's also here on the UI. So now I would have a fresh branch that has just those 3 commits. So what I want to get across here is that you can really freely edit your Git history after actually creating the branches and committing them. So you can move commits between branches, you can rewrite an existing commit's contents, and do all of these things. Of course, if you've already pushed some of this onto the remote, then you're going to have to force push it, which you might not want to do in a lot of cases, but as long as you're only messing with this locally, you have a lot of freedom, and all of this is super easily and super quickly accessible to you in Android Studio. Okay, so I think that's a wrap. So to recap real quickly, I really want to emphasize that you have change lists that you can use, which are a really powerful tool within Android Studio. Also that you can use pretty much any Git action in Android Studio. You can actually run command line Git actions in Studio really quickly too, but I'm not going to dive into that. Oh, just one quick thing. which this reminded me of. So we've just done a bunch of moving around and just comments through the GUI. You can actually always open the Git console here if you want to know what happened in the background, especially if something goes wrong or if you have Git hooks that execute and log things. You can always just open the Git console, and then you'll see what Android Studio has executed for you, like such as here is this cherry picking command that I just ran. So you can always look at what actually happens behind the scenes, even if you're just using things through the user interface. So yeah, easy commands, change logs, shelving, sharing changes with others, and yeah, probably install the Git Toolbox plugin. I think that's the last point. Also, if you want more resources about this, I'm going to link my website for it. I have an article here, which is all about managing your local work, a lot about change lists and why you want to use it over stashing. It goes into even more detail than what I've covered here, so I can really recommend that. And then there are just a bunch of official pieces of documentation that talk more about what you can do within IntelliJ to manage your Git repository. And yeah, that's a wrap. Do we have any questions? I'm not gonna stop screen sharing yet in case we need the repo still. No questions at all. Okay. Well, all right. Thank you, Dan. I'll give you the rest of your Friday back. Thanks for tuning in for this talk. And I hope that you've learned something.